Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about episode 5 of season 6 of HBO's Game of Thrones. Join me, won't you? So this, in my opinion anyways, was the most well-balanced and paced episode that we've gotten all season long, really containing the most rewarding individual storylines where plot threads were both excitingly and patiently set up, as well as very satisfyingly, albeit tragically, concluded. And that's not to say that I didn't have a few gripes with the episode and a few frustrating reveals were thrown in there, but by and large, a lot of positive stuff to talk about, so let's go ahead and focus on that first. At the top of the episode, we got the long-awaited reunion between Sansa and Littlefinger, a scene which already showcased such a refreshing balance. To see the power that Sansa displayed was just very enjoyable, and I will say this numerous times in this week's review, it was also just a very satisfying reversal of what we've become accustomed to seeing. Not only did this scene provide a very small first course amount of justice beginning to be served, but it also had this character that's been pushed, pulled, and tossed around for most of the series, which admittedly has been at least partially due to her own selfishness and immaturity, finally beginning to stand up for herself. But the scene was made all the more riveting in the very unique to Game of Thrones way that Sansa attacked Littlefinger. And on one hand, the scene did, similar to a lot of scenes this season, now that the writers have completely stepped away from Martin's books, did feel just a little bit clean and a little bit modern, but the rawness of emotion and the consistency of character really did make it work in a very powerful and thrilling way. Just to see a woman in that time and in that place stand up to a man and say, no, you are going to walk back through these specific things that you did to me, and I'm going to make you say them and just glimpse in the smallest of ways the horrors that I experienced at your hand and at the hands of those you placed me in. Which, in a way, does kind of feel modern, but also just feels emotionally true, because Sansa knows how much Littlefinger cared for her mother, and by extension cares for her, and knows that she can really twist the knife in there if she can make him see just how much he failed her. The scene was also masterfully handled, and just how it justified why Sansa, right then and there, didn't have Brienne cut down Littlefinger. And it did so by very appropriately playing up the kind of manipulator and strategist that she's now become, seeking to use Littlefinger and his power to her own ends. I do think, though, that she being his student and her perspective of the world having been so informed by his own, it's incredibly dangerous of her to think that she can outwit someone as crafty as Littlefinger, which is exactly what made the scene between Tyrion, Varys, and Kinvara so incredibly satisfying and really just classic Game of Thrones as we watch this power play go down, one which opened with, as we've come accustomed to seeing, Varys just dominating in a very smart way, smart for him and smart for the showrunners, seeming to dismantle this follower of the Lord of Light and her contradictory prophecy about Dany, only to, for once, be silenced. And just how this week's director, Lost alumni Jack Bender, staged that scene was very simple, but also effective as the power shifted and Kinvara moved further and further up the stairs, really putting him in his place. And again, just the way the scene was written was also extremely intelligent on the writer's part. Having Varys not only know of Stannis' failure, but also Melisandre's concurrent failure, did remove a lot of that frustrating feeling of we, the audience, know more than the characters, and just watching them act out of ignorance is kind of boring. But by having a character like Varys within the show point out those inconsistencies, we go from writing that seemed paradoxical and lazy to, potentially anyways, writing that seems intentional and intriguing, just like that. Of course, there is always the possibility that David and DB still have no clue where they're going with all these prophets of the Lord of Light, or whether they're full of truth or lies. But again, this scene at least opens the door for something good to follow. Also, with the way that things played out with Hodor, which, don't worry, we will talk about more of that in a moment. Awesome moment. But with all of that, I did get thinking. A lot. One, I do think we're going to find out what was said to Varys by that voice that called out to him from the flames. And in this case, I'm assuming that it will be more than Varys, Varys, Varys! Not trying to make fun. Powerful moment. But two, Kinvara didn't just talk about what the voice said, but the name of the one who spoke, which makes me think we'll get an answer to that as well. And three, and this is truly a wild, out there theory, but what if Bran, or a warg like him, is the Lord of Light? Yes, I know. It's crazy. It's insane. I'm probably completely off, but just track with me for a moment. What if this warg travels back in time and just like Bran did with his father at the Tower of Joy, or with Willis/Hodor at Winterfell, calls out to and connects with these priestesses, telling them what is about to occur. And if the Lord of Light is in fact a human, it would sort of justify and explain why so many of his prophecies seem to be anyways inconsistent and erroneous. But what makes this theory really juicy, or really ridiculous, depending how you want to look at it, is also my answer to this week's Twitter question, which comes to us from the ever-faithful Griffin Watson. So where in the Seven Hells do Bran and Mara go from here? All of their friends are dead. Well, sincerely, thank you again for the excellent Twitter question, Griffin. And on this week's episode, we got 2 separate flashbacks/flash forwards, which critique the way well they're writing. They were both beautifully directed by Jack Bender, as he in very cinematic ways brought us into both visions, telling us where we were and where we'd return to by mirroring the imagery of the weirwood tree. And on top of that, as David and DB have pointed out in a recent interview, the pattern of the stones around the tree very directly connected to the strange formations that we've seen throughout the show, even as far back as episode 1 of season 1, revealing that their authors are the Children of the Forest. Which I did find to be a fun reveal, but at the same time, the other reveal that the Children of the Forest were also the creators of the White Walkers, made to defend their land from man, that I found to be a little too big of a reveal just to be thrown out there willy-nilly like it was. We didn't know these characters in any real way, and therefore their involvement in such a pivotal aspect of the show made that occurrence feel almost entirely inconsequential. And on top of that, without even batting an eyelid, it took what we thought to be absolute evil, the pure darkness that our heroes would ultimately face off against in the war to come, and make it anything but that. And yes, in its defense, that is very much the show where we're often playing in this gray area. I just wish that they had taken the time and teed things up so that that moment could have been all the more impactful. But back to the place where all this went down, I really do think that that tree will in some way play into Bran's future. Of course, part of me does believe that he'll now travel southward, attempting to reunite with Jon and Sansa, but what excites me far more than that is the idea that he and Mara will travel further north to that tree, where he'll continue to have these prophetic visions, which would become less and less visions and more connections with the past. And again, this is where the really juicy/ridiculous part comes in, and that would be the connection between the Lord being the Lord of Light and the assumption that Bran's future would be full of light, both in dragon fire as well as leaving the darkness of winter behind and entering the red dawn of spring. I mean, after all, the last of Martin's books, or the supposed last of Martin's books, will be called A Dream of Spring. And speaking of dragon's fire, let's talk about the scene between Jorah and Dany. And though their storyline is small, and unlike my other favorite storylines from the episode, not plotted over a number of scenes, it still managed to carry with it such weight and importance, as it said aloud a couple of feelings and desires that have needed to be said aloud for quite some time. Yes, we've known for some time that Jorah has been in love with Dany. In fact, we've known it since season 1, and we've known that Dany knew, and we've known that Jorah knew that Dany knew. And as ridiculous as all of that sounds, there is something so true and important about saying aloud those words to someone. When you say to someone's face, "I love you," you're forcing that relationship to change and evolve. And you saw it. You saw Dany take in that truth, process it, and decide that she, in her own way, loved Jorah too. And the other thing that was said aloud in the scene, and needed to be said aloud with renewed vigor and confidence, was Dany's, "When I take the Seven Kingdoms, I need you by my side." It really just told us that she would never be fully satisfied in Meereen, that she'd be stuck there for the rest of her life, but she would be returning one day to take the Iron Throne. And the fact that she even phrased it, "When I take the Seven Kingdoms," really just spoke volumes to her confidence in that. And the other thing that I really appreciated about this scene was the writer's confidence in sending Jorah away from Dany once again. Not only did that help keep this show from becoming so abruptly small, which this season really seems to have been just rushing to do, but it also just felt true to the characters and pleasantly consequential to their past actions and decisions. And speaking of characters splitting up and going different directions, let's hop on over to the Iron Islands and talk about that storyline for a bit, which was yet another one that I really enjoyed this week. First of all, I just so appreciated the fact that the writers continue not to spoil Theon's great character arc this season. I sincerely expected and feared that he would just stand up and make a claim on the throne. Not because he wanted to or wanted to stab Yara in the back, but because this very male-dominated society was about to force him to do so. So that he stood up and with this ever-impressive backbone said, "She is your rightful ruler," just continued to be so refreshing and exciting. And just that small flicker on Yara's face after he said that really did mark the first moment where I think she truly began to trust him again. And the other really exciting element of the scene, something that I haven't really felt since the season began, was just the divulging of a plan that I knew would take a good long while to come to pass. That being Euron's desire to build a fleet and join with Daenerys Targaryen, which may seem so contrary to what an Ironborn would desire, as they usually crave complete autonomy and rule over their land and destiny. But for Euron, who himself boasted of his travels and expanded understanding of the world, did feel appropriately forward-thinking. Though on this show, I really don't think there's any characters that are more forward-thinking than Arya Stark, as she has just bided her time over and over again, lying to Jagan about wanting to be this girl with no name. And honestly, if there was any sort of confusion or debate about whether or not she wanted to give up or had given up her Stark name, I'm pretty sure her storyline this week put that to rest, as it put her right back where she was at the end of season 1, witnessing the very thing that started her on this very personal road to revenge. What keeps Arya's kind of obvious plans and deceptions from becoming annoying, though, is the fact that Jagan really does refuse to play the aloof fool. He seems very aware, or at the very least very suspicious, that Arya isn't a girl who wants for nothing, but an angry Stark on a quest for revenge. Which does make me think that it's part of Jagan's plan to draw the truth out of Arya by tasking her to kill this Cersei 2.0, knowing that the real Cersei remains on the girl's hit list. Which does make me hopeful that Arya will one day be fully discovered or forced to take a step as a faceless assassin that is impossible to undo, which is what I thought they were doing when they blinded her last season, right up to the point when they backpedaled right out of that decision. And I want Jagan's line, one way or the other, a face will be added to the Hall, not to be an idle threat. One thing that could not be undone, and cannot be undone, unless of course he returns as a White Walker, was the creation and demise of Hodor this week, which was just so beautifully and powerfully done, in my opinion. Just that they took their time over a few episodes to establish Willis in the past, and then that Bran could connect with those historic events, and then, after patiently plotting all that out, utilizing all those pieces in this episode to reveal how he got his name and how that was connected to his final, very heroic acts in this story. You hold that door, Hodor. Also, I did appreciate, though I did find the demise of the Three-Eyed Raven to be slightly anticlimactic, I did appreciate the fact that prior to that, when Bran asked him if he was ready to be the Three-Eyed Raven himself, he simply replied, no. It just felt realistic and made Bran's steps from here all the more uncertain in a very exciting way. Those are my thoughts anyways on this week's episode. I've really enjoyed hearing from you guys and what you guys have thought of each of these episodes, so definitely continue that, comment below, and let me know. Also, I would love to answer more of you guys' Twitter questions, so definitely hop on over to Twitter, sending out your questions, hashtagging them the Heartbeat, and I will answer as many of them as I can right here on the show each week. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.